Hi, this is Barry. Welcome back to my workshop. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this awl for just a few bucks. The steel that I'm using for this project is O1 tool steel. It's oil hardened, and I ordered it online, got 36-inch piece for a couple of bucks. And I'm just going to cut it into a 6-inch piece for this project. Now, the steel comes in an annealed state, which means it's soft, and also means that you can cut it with regular tools. So I'm going to just use a hacksaw and cut off that 6-inch piece. Once we harden it by heat treating it, you wouldn't be able to cut it with a hacksaw. Now, in order to get the faces on the tips and get 3 that are evenly lined up, I'm going to make a little jig here, and I'm just going to use triangulation to get the 6 sides, and then I'll use it to make a triangle. Just mark every other of the 6 points. And now I have an equilateral triangle. And then I'll drill a hole in the middle that's the same diameter as the drill rod, or 1/8 inch. And then I'll just cut off around the marks that I made for the equilateral triangle. As an aside, I just got this Japanese pull saw, and I have to say I'm really liking it. It really cuts well and fast. And the pull stroke is much easier than the push stroke on my Western saws. So the jig is complete. All I'm going to do is insert the rod through the middle, so I'll be able to index as I grind the tip. I suppose it's possible to do this purely by hand without the jig, but having this little block of wood really helps line it up and get even faces on the tip. And I adjust the length that it sticks out from the jig to get a longer point on the end. Now, by grinding this, normally you wouldn't do this with tool steel because it does ruin the temper, but we're going to reestablish the heat treatment here in just a minute. And I think that looks pretty good. I'm just using a butane torch to do the heat treatment. I'm going to heat it until it's glowing slight red. I found that for this thin metal, the butane is plenty hot enough. For thicker pieces, might need another heat source. But I'm going to get it towards glowing slightly. It looks a little brighter in the video than it did in person. And then I'm quenching it in vegetable oil. At this stage, it would be too brittle to use, so I'm going to temper it by putting it in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. And while that's doing that, I'll work on the handle. This is a small piece of hickory that I found in the scrap bin, and it's cut to about 3/4 of an inch or 18 millimeter square. I'm using a step bit to start the hole. The step bit is wider at the base, and it doesn't flex the way the smaller 1/8 inch bit will, and it helps you get it started properly centered, which is important for the way this is going to work. Now, after you start the hole with the step bit, it's properly centered, and I can go to the 1/8 inch bit and drill the final hole. If you don't use the step bit, the 1/8 inch bit wobbles. It just doesn't come out centered. And I'm going in about 2 inches or about 50 millimeters. Now that I have the hole drilled for the piece of metal for later, I can go ahead and start shaping the handle. And I'm going to make room for a copper ferrule. I tried to get this lined up right, but the first pass was too loose. So I'm going to just work my way back a little bit and make it the proper size, and then I'll trim off the extra later. And then I use some epoxy to hold on the ferrule, which is just a piece of copper pipe. And after the ferrule sets up, I'll do the finish shaping on the handle. You probably can't see this in the video, but I'm making a slight taper so that the end next to the ferrule is just a little bit wider than the back end. And it'll be apparent why I do this a little bit later when I show you how it works. And this is just a 3/4 inch skew chisel that I'm using. I'm going to give it a light sanding here because I want it to have a little bit of texture. And then I'm going to give it linseed oil and varnish finish. Kind of a homegrown Danish oil. And I'll use the parting tool to separate the handle. And after our tool still cools off, I'll take it to the 1000 grit Waterstone and clean up those facets. And since I ground the flat areas on the bench grinder, the surfaces are slightly concave, but these will straighten out after some time on the Waterstone. And I can stop using the Waterstone when I've got 3 nice flat shiny faces. And after I'm finished with the 1000 grit, I flip it over and give it a few passes with the 4000 grit. And now we have 3 flat sides 60 degrees to each other. And I'll use some epoxy to hold the bit into the handle. This is actually kind of tricky because it's a pretty snug fit. Okay, so the tool is finished right now, and I just want to show you a little more closely that there are 3 angled sides at 60 degrees apart, and they have a nice point. I'll just show you some of the ways you could use it. If you're wanting to cut a board and you need to describe a line, you could use it for that. Just lay your straight edge across the board, and gently, because this is a pretty sharp tip and it's pretty thin, but you can still make that mark for your saw line. And you could also use it to mark a point for a nail or a screw or even drilling a hole, and align that exactly where you need it, just like a center punch. And then one other thing that I think is pretty neat about this tool, I mentioned that I tapered the handle slightly. I'm going to show you how I'm going to use my hands to make it as a drill, and because of the taper, it's going to help resist the downward force. So if I want to pre-drill a hole, I'll find that spot that I marked earlier, and then I just hold the tool between my hands and rub my hands back and forth, and now I have pre-drilled a hole that I could use for a screw or drill or even a nail. And if you have a board that's thin enough, you can also drill an 1/8 inch hole all the way through. This is about a 1/4 inch piece, and just find my point and rub it back and forth, and in just a matter of seconds I can go through that board. The tip is through now, a little bit more, and now I've got an 1/8 inch hole all the way through that board, perfectly sized. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you like seeing how I made this miniature awl. If you have any questions or comments, please put those in the section below. If you want to see some other videos of tools that I made, I'll put the links over here somewhere. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.